Welcome to the Seriously Absurd podcast, where there are no stupid questions, only inquisitive idiots.
Hey, Zex.
Hi, Lab.
What are we talking about today?
Today, we're going to talk about human sexuality, and in particular, foot fetishes, and whether or not a foot fetish is considered a blessing.
Okay, elaborate.
So, as I understand it, you put this into the spreadsheet of questions.
Well, you don't have to say that. Okay. I want your take on it.
You want my take on it?
Yeah.
Okay. Are we going to edit this part out then?
No. Keep going.
Okay. So my take on it is that there is an entire spectrum of fetish. And I think it's important that we sort of define some terms here just to get this out of the way. So generally, a fetish is a requirement that a non-standard practice be part of sex. A kink is a preference or a thing that you will do. So a fetish is a requirement, a kink is not. And then there's a sort of technical...
I think the word we need is a paraphilia.
Well, you see, and this is the thing, is that society tends to use paraphilia and fetish sort of interchangeably, leaning in the direction of fetish when they mean paraphilia. So for the purposes of this conversation, I would like to just use the sort of societal standard term of fetish to mean either an object or an act used interchangeably. So let's just use that. But
okay,
fetish is a requirement, whereas kink is a preference or an acceptance or a tolerance. So with that out of the way, I would like to say that as fetishes go, a foot fetish is relatively tame, and if you were to have any particular fetish, a foot fetish may actually be a fine one to have. But there's an entire range of foot fetishes. There's people who like to have their toes sucked on, and then there's people that want to be aggressively trampled. And all of that sort of falls into the realm of the foot fetish. And there's so much more here that, like, we could spend an hour just going into the rainbow of foot fetishes.
Yeah, so since I was the one who put it on the spreadsheet, as you so unkindly pointed out, I'm going to define it as the feet as an object causes sexual arousal. It's not a requirement for you to enjoy any of that, but just feet are sexy to you.
Okay.
So we're going to be very simple about that. You don't have to be trampled. It's just feet are sexy.
Okay.
So then my passing thought that I had when putting this on our spreadsheet was that if you had a foot fetish, you would have the ability to enjoy something that is freely available in other people.
Okay. So it's a little problematic. So as we talked about before, I used to work with a guy who is gay, and he told me that he had a lot of difficulty during the summertime because in a predominantly male-oriented profession, there would be all of these guys walking around in shorts, and he just could not take his eyes off of their legs. Like, it was a distraction for him to have this thing that sexually arouses him just in full display, just cavalierly being shown off. And I had never even considered this perspective before, that in the same way that I may be experiencing attraction towards a woman, that physical attraction to things like, legs or, calves or knees or what, like that might actually be something that a man is experiencing towards other men, or that women are experiencing towards other women. Like, I had a very, very heteronormative and very selfish perspective on this aspect of attraction. And when this was pointed out to me by my coworker, it just blew my mind. And so I think that in some ways, having a normally exposed part of the human anatomy be a source of arousal could be distracting or complicating for general human interactions, rather than just being a blessing because it's so freely available. Like, the free availability of it could become problematic.
Yeah. So then it would be for you a question, or for the proverbial person, a question of how severe is this? Is it just a pleasant addition to your daily life? Or is it you are uncomfortably and unwillingly subjected to people's feet, and that causes you an uncomfortable amount of sexual arousal?
Right. And then there's also sort of a flip side of this, is that generally speaking, I think that it is the case with sort of foot attraction, much as it is with general attraction, is that there is a sort of idealized type in the mind. That it's not any feet, it is perfect feet. And the vast majority of feet may not be the quote-unquote perfect foot, and may actually cause you a sort of revulsion at the sight of it, and it could create sort of internal confusion and conflict as a result. So that's another perspective.
That's a good point, because I had not considered the fact that the foot fetish would be like basically any other form of sexual arousal, something that is dependent on the quality of the goods, so to speak. So what I was thinking about now is what if every woman or man, if you prefer, in your life walked around shirtless all the time? That would be good to look at sometimes, and you'd also see a lot of stuff that you didn't want to see.
Well, right, but I think that if that were the case, that's something that you had always been around, if it's like something that you grew up with and it was just like a matter of society standard, then I think it would be just as the same as it is for people who do not have a foot fetish to encounter people wearing flip-flops everywhere. It's just something that you don't even think about, you don't even necessarily acknowledge or notice. Like, it's not a thing that causes you any feelings either way. Now, if we just, flipped a switch on it right now and said, like, everybody takes their shirt off, well, then it could be a little disconcerting.
Sure. So I guess now what we're getting at is our fetishes, in particularly a foot fetish, and we're just sort of spitballing here because we don't know. But I imagine, now that I think about it, that they're very contextual. So it would never be so simple as feet in public are great.
I will say that I do have a significant amount of knowledge here, and there is a certain portion of the foot fetish community that does enjoy a sort of foot voyeurism. There is something in the foot fetishism community that is known as dangling. And that is when a woman wearing, I guess it could also be a man, but I'm only familiar with this from a man attracted to a woman perspective. A woman wearing a shoe will dangle the heel of the shoe off of their foot so that you can kind of sort of see the sole of her foot and the arch of her foot, but not her toes. And if you go searching the internet for pictures of this, you will find people who have surreptitiously, it's kind of like upskirt photography in a way, in that you are taking pictures of someone without their consent. But these pictures aren't sort of explicitly sexual in a mainstream sense.
Well, yeah, but they're being used that way, aren't they?
They are being used that way. And this sort of gets back to one of the possible problems with feet being on display, is that if you had a foot fetish and you found feet attractive, and you had a friend or a coworker that had feet that you found very attractive, can you involve that person in your sexual fantasies without asking them, without telling them? Most people wouldn't want to know,
right?
I think. But if you actually know this person, do you have a right to involve them in your sexual fantasies?
I don't think that's particularly different than just the common practice of looking at someone and finding them attractive or not finding them attractive. It's not like you're saving them for the spank bank specifically. It's just you're seeing them in the course of your life.
Okay.
And people, regardless of if they say they do or not, they make judgments on that if they're of the sex that they're attracted to.
Yeah.
So I don't think this is a voyeurism thing. It's just a part of the anatomy that defines attractivity to a person is more freely exposed than it would be for someone who does not have a foot fetish.
Okay. That makes sense.
So to get back to the original question, what do you think? Is it?
Do I think that having a foot fetish is a blessing? I think that for some people and for some types of foot fetishes, it may be a blessing. There's a sex columnist by the name of Dan Savage. And many years ago, I read a column where somebody had written in talking about their foot fetish and how they absolutely loved giving their girlfriend foot rubs. But then their girlfriend found out that this was a sexually arousing act for them and stopped letting them do it because she was really weirded out by it. And I think that if you're the type of person that enjoys getting a foot rub and you don't mind if somebody else is getting off on it, then them having a foot fetish could actually be a blessing for you, the person that doesn't have the foot fetish. So that is one of the ways in which it could actually be a blessing.
So, the more I think about it, the more I'm convinced that it is context dependent. And what I mean by that is keeping in mind the story that you told of your coworker and his attraction to bare legs with men wearing shorts at work. But I think that a foot fetish, like basically any other sexual attraction, in my opinion, is dependent on the context in which it is found. Therefore, just seeing feet generally in the course of business, like if you see someone wearing sandals, that is not necessarily an encumbrance upon your life because it's in the wrong context. It's like, a gynecologist seeing the female anatomy. And, that is not sexy to them. And I know gynecologists and they all say, no, it's not because it's the wrong context. And similarly to the foot fetish, I think that is what is the case for the majority of people who experience a foot fetish, where it's a foot fetish in the context of being sexy with your feet, not just the presence of feet in general.
Yeah, I do think that there is definitely some context here. But the thing that I was saying about sort of the voyeuristic photos, and I mean, let's be honest, wiki feet is a thing.
Is it?
Oh, you didn't know about this?
No.
Oh, surprise. Yeah, so there are pictures of celebrities' feet on wiki feet. And so there is, I think, an element of availability being extremely convenient, actually being a thing. I'm really surprised you didn't know about this.
No,
I swear this is something that has been talked about.
Okay. Have we figured this out yet?
I think so. I think that the answer is it can be a blessing in certain circumstances, but because of the wide range of sexual expression and the broad spectrum of what constitutes foot fetishism, I don't think that you can make a blanket statement saying that it is a blessing.
All right. So we're going to sit on the fence. That sounds good. Thanks, Zax.
Thanks, Lab. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of the Seriously Absurd podcast. Please come back again next week for a discussion about parking.